federal government got involved with all the best of intentions. You know, if people want higher education, we want people to have that opportunity. So the federal government got involved the way it gets involved in everything. It throws money at the problem. And so we have poured money into higher education, which is why, you know, colleges, campuses now are really nice places. You know, they're really welcoming. They're fun places to be. Our kids now are taking almost 5.5 years to complete a 4-year degree, and this is a lot of kids with college credit in the bag when they leave high school. You know, how are they able to do that? We've also, by the way, enticed our kids to collectively incur $1 trillion of student loan debt. So now on average, not only is it taking 5.5 years to graduate, but they're also graduating with almost $30,000 student loan debt. That's the average. And unfortunately, often with degrees that employers aren't valuing. You know, fill-in-the-blank studies courses. So a very depressing study by Northeastern University showed that currently, recent college graduates, 50% are either unemployed or employed in a job that required no college education whatsoever. So my point being is, all of our good intentions, trying to make college more accessible, we've made it less accessible because we've made it so much more unaffordable. Again, just want people to think. Now, before I get to the last slide, then I'll open up to questions. The next series of slides is talking about poverty. And we're going to be talking about a subject that's pretty uncomfortable. It's not a particularly politically popular thing to talk about. It's not something meant to help you get reelected. But I think it's something we have to think about, have to consider in terms of root cause analysis of poverty. But I'm going to be talking about out-of-wedlock birth rates. I'm going to be talking about single-parent families, not to disparage them. It's not a value judgment. It's talking about poverty and how it's just a fact that if you have an intact family, you have a lot lower percentage chance of being touched by poverty. Single-parent households struggle financially. Let's start talking about it. By the way, I'm not the first person alarmed by this. The first person I ever heard talk about this was a social scientist called Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He paid a pretty heavy price in his profession, even bringing the subject up. He was ostracized for it. He also became a Democrat senator from the state of New York, but in the mid-60s, he was looking at the history of out-of-wedlock birth rates. It's a pretty dangerous societal metric. And if you agree with me that families are a foundational building block of a successful society, but he looked at that and out-of-wedlock birth rates had doubled from 1940 to the mid-60s. He was alarmed by that. It's not the only thing that's happening in the 60s. You know, for the first time, America had the black and white boob tube. We had images of abject poverty being beamed into our house, into our living rooms. And listen, I think America is a compassionate society. I think we all agree that we want a strong social safety net to help people that can't help themselves. We actually want to help people help themselves. And so we looked at these images. We saw that even though poverty rates have been declining pretty precipitously because of a booming economy, a booming post-World War II economy, for America, 29 million Americans in poverty, 15% poverty rate, that's not acceptable. We refuse to accept that. So collectively, with all the best of intentions, being a compassionate society, we embarked on a $16 trillion war on poverty. And again, what I'm asking people to ask themselves is, did it work? Now, let's do a little Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm in Washington, D.C. We don't measure the intended consequence of our action, much less really measure the unintended negative consequences. So let's just check it out. Number of people in poverty went from, let's go back, 29 million Americans, it's up to 46 million Americans. We have 47 million Americans on food stamps. In 2000, there were 17 million. Now we got 47 million Americans. We're spending 17 billion, now we're spending 80 billion. It was 6% of our population, between 6 and 10% historically based on economic conditions. Now we got 15% of Americans on food stamps. That's not a metric of success. It's a metric of failure. We've gone from 50% in poverty, we're still 15%. It's gone up and down with economic variations in our economy. We're still 15%. I don't think anybody could look at these facts and say, yeah, the war on poverty worked. Now that's tragic. I don't like reporting that. It's a shame. But it's just the fact. We have to acknowledge that. You know, let me divert a little bit and break it down demographically. You know, when we started measuring this, the late 50s, you can see elderly poverty was at 35%. That's why I think Social Security was a good idea. People were impoverished when they got old, so we wanted to basically force people to save for their retirement. Unfortunately, we didn't let them keep that money for themselves. We We paid those retirement savings into the government, and they spent it. You don't have an individual account. You don't have money there. You really don't have a guarantee, because any Congress can change that. There's no legal requirement for the government to pay you your Social Security because it's not yours. That's gone. But anyway, you have 35% of elderly in poverty. You have 27% of young people, 18 and younger. And you can see what's happened over time. Shortly after the war on poverty, you can see those curves cross. So that we've done a pretty good job at reducing elderly poverty from 35% to 9%. I'd say it's still too high. We'd still like to alleviate, put it down to 0. But we made some progress. But look what's happened to youth poverty. Made some progress, but you can see those curves cross. And what this curve really represents is a huge wealth transfer from young to old. And that problem's only going to get worse based on, again, all these promises made. Who's going to pay for them? Well, your kids and grandkids. Their debt burden's going to grow. So just a little fact to point out. Now let's go back to out-of-wedlock birth rates. Let's hope that all of our good intentions at least stabilize that situation. At least kept that from increasing. Unfortunately, it didn't. Today, out-of-wedlock birth rates are at 41%. That's not a good thing. Again, not a value judgment on single parents who you got millions of them doing a great job raising great kids. But when it comes to poverty, this is not a good sign. And here's the thought experiment I want you to just go through. I want you to think about, could all of our $16 trillion well-intentioned poverty, or war on poverty, contributed to this? Was the primary cause? Now, one of the first people I met in the campaign trail was Senator Glenn Grothman, who at the time was giving a stump speech talking about a single mom, who, let me emphasize, we have a great deal of compassion for. We want to help people like that. But she was struggling. She was working hard, working a part-time job, making about $15,000. And then what Senator Grothman did is he added up the dollar value of the state and federal benefits she got. He came up with the total combined their wage about $51,000. I had my Senate staff do it. We came up with about $41,000. Depends on assumptions. So somewhere in that range. Now, I will point out that's largely tax-free. In a longer, more depressing PowerPoint presentation, I would have shown that during our recovery, median household incomes actually declined from $55,000 to $51,000. That's taxable income. Now here's the thought experiment. If that young woman, who again, we have got a great deal of compassion for, we want to help her out, if she wants to increase the dollar value of benefits she gets from state and federal government, what's one of the things she can do? Quit. Have more kids. She can have another child out of wedlock. If she wants to lose it all, well, she finds a young man who's working to support her, and they actually form one of those intact families that actually reduce poverty. We had a very interesting witness in front of our budget committees, the head of the welfare department in Pennsylvania. He did a study on a single mom. And in the state of Pennsylvania, every state's different, but he showed that in the state of Pennsylvania, it was marginally beneficial for a single mom to make up to $29,000. Past that point, because of increased tax rates, reduction in benefits, there was no marginal value. In other words, it didn't pay her another penny to earn another dollar. So it didn't put any additional money in her pocket to make $30,000, or $40,000, or $50,000, or $60,000, or $65,000. She would have had to leapfrog from $29,000 up to $29,000 before she realized any marginal benefit for additional work. Now, unless we're willing to take a look at those facts, those realities, acknowledge and admit the problem, define it properly, look for the root cause of the problem, take a look at how government's good intentions might have contributed to those problems. Unless we have that honest, open discussion, debate, I would argue as a proven problem solver, you haven't gone through the first two steps in any problem-solving process. First, admit that you have a problem. Secondly, properly define it. And unfortunately, as human beings, way too often we have to hit rock bottom before we admit we have a problem. I mean, you got to find yourself, I guess, drunk on a daily basis in the hallway before you realize, I got more than just a one additional drinking problem. I'm an alcoholic and I better seek treatment. Okay? So we got to admit we have a problem, and collectively we're just not doing it. Now, so many of these programs are always sold on the basis that we're doing it for the kids, right? That's why Lyndon Johnson, during the war on poverty, went down to a porch in Appalachia to show the children who've got a great deal of compassion for that we want to help. But I guess I'd argue Is that good for our kids? Is that good for our kids? We need to start thinking about that. That's really all I'm asking Wisconsin, America, is to start thinking. Put the political demagoguery aside. Get some facts, get some figures, demand from your policy makers, your elected officials, really what's some real information. What are some policy alternatives, and how will they fill in? How will they start solving these enormous problems? Let's start debating these issues with real information rather than political demagoguery, because demagoguery does not solve problems. So with that, happy to open up to questions. Anything's fair game. Sir.
Senator Johnson, yes, thanks. Dave Templeton, I'm an elected official here in town of Bristol. You began your talk with something I think that's really important, and you said that the way you problem solve is you do not start out by telling the person you're talking to how good they're not. And what I've noticed, along with a lot of other people, is that probably for about the last 10 to 12, over a decade, the opponents, the people on the other side.
On both sides, I was.
Okay.
We're probably getting, anticipating a question. This is a bipartisan problem, but go ahead.
Have been pretty successful at encouraging Americans to attach an emotional argument, attach emotions to an argument that really is just factual. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I recently saw, along with a lot of other people, which I think is on YouTube now, the confrontation between you and Senator Rockefeller. And it was really an eye-opener for me. And I want to just ask you about that, and ask you about it in the sense of wondering if you believe that the United States now, the American people, are beginning to reach a tipping point where they're willing to begin to look at the facts instead of the straw men that are being presented to them.
Sure.
Because when I saw that video, first of all, I want to say thank you for not allowing somebody else to define who you are. That's something that a lot of Republicans have not been able to do for whatever reason. I don't know why. But besides my first impression of hearing Senator Rockefeller's comments saying that anybody who's against Obamacare, it's because of a racist reason. And you were the only person in the room who was against Obamacare, so he was in essence saying you're a racist. Not that Obamacare was sold on a pack of lies, that there were mistruths, falsehoods that were used to sell the program. Not that it, instead of lowering the rates, has actually raised them. Not that it was untrue that people could keep their doctor if they wanted to, because that turned out not to be true. And not that the CBO has now estimated that as many people who didn't have insurance at the beginning of the program, 10 years forward, we're going to have the same number of people who will not have insurance. None of those things matter. It was all because you're a racist. Okay, so I'm wondering.
Let's get to a question.
Okay,
I do want to leave that time for other people to ask questions.
So what I'm really curious is, it seemed like Senator Rockefeller was talking to somebody besides you, like maybe the straw man that was sitting next to you. So my question is, do you believe that there is a formula for confronting that kind of approach to politics that you think works? Because I thought what you did worked.
So I haven't, other than what I said at the hearing, I really haven't. You can sit down. I haven't really spoken too much publicly about that. Let me just say, when you're in the moment, this is true of the Benghazi hearing too. I've been literally attacked by my supporters. Why didn't you come back with a zinger? Because you're in the moment. You're processing information. I'm mainly thinking of questions and listening to the response. What happened in that hearing is, it was a pretty sparsely attended hearing. It was really a hearing about Jay Rockefeller was, I think, the primary supporter of, maybe the proposer of the medical loss ratio part of Obamacare. He wanted to have this kind of a celebratory hearing, which is his right, he's chairman of the committee, but a bunch of us showed up to just kind of point out that, yeah, okay, yes, I know Americans have gotten $1.6 billion worth of rebates from the insurance, those mean, greedy insurance companies, but one of the witnesses talked about just the insurance fee assessed to insurance companies is $8 billion. So basically what's happening is Obamacare is forcing up the cost of health care. It's not driving it down, it's forcing it up with all the funding mechanisms, the reduction of payments from suppliers. And Senator Rockefeller didn't really like the fact that we were making those points, as well as, I didn't read emails. We're doing that on the Senate floor. And it's getting under Harry Reid's skin to the point where he called Americans that are writing to us basically liars. He didn't call them liars, but he said those are all lies. Those emails are all lies. That's pretty close to specifically calling the citizens of Wisconsin who are writing us, by the way, at about 150 to 1 ratio of people harmed by Obamacare versus those who have been advantaged by it. Now again, I realize that's anecdotal. I'm not saying that's the exact, that's maybe even close to the ratio, but those Wisconsinites are not liars. They're telling real stories. So all I had done in the hearing is I just read a few key phrases like, we feel like collateral damage. Can't believe this is being done to us. We're scared. Please help us. We're begging you to help us. These are real phrases from real emails from real Wisconsinites really being harmed by Obamacare. The chairman didn't apparently like that, and so when I see the tape, I'm sitting in the hearing room. I'm the only Republican left. He's the only Democrat, and he makes a statement. I go, what? He's saying talking about these emails. Obviously read those emails. He's basically making a blanket statement that if you oppose Obamacare, is it because you don't like this president? Maybe you don't like the color of his skin? And so when I first heard that, I'll tell you my first reaction was, I got to respond to that. Not, oh great. I'm going, I can't let him say that. He's basically, I thought he was implying I was a racist. I certainly thought he was implying that all those good people that have been harmed by Obamacare, many of them also were doing it because of racial motives, and I couldn't let that stand. So, he talked a little bit longer, and then I had to respond. I haven't really said anything else about that. I have been asked, I've heard people say, are you going to demand an apology? I mean, what I would respond to that is, listen, the people that Senator Harry Reid, that Senator Rockefeller owe an apology to, are the good people that are writing in, calling, emailing, that have been harmed by Obamacare, and I think both Harry Reid and Senator Rockefeller owe those people an apology. Okay, but again, this wasn't a moment I just felt I just had to respond. But it is unfortunately too often this very divisive political process that we're in right now. I would say Obamacare was certainly a contributor to the divisiveness. The fact that was what I was trying to point out. It was passed on a 100% purely partisan basis. That's not what the history of this nation has been. When we've done these big social programs, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicare, whether it's Civil Rights, the Voting Rights Act, or whatever, we've always found common ground. We've had bipartisan support for those things so that when these bills are passed, and not everybody agrees with all those things, but at least you had enough people across the political spectrum to say, okay, that's the right thing for us to do, and so they haven't been as divisive. But something this large as Obamacare passed on a purely partisan basis, I think the proof is in the pudding. It's been incredibly divisive, and that division is not going away, and it is preventing us, I think, from really moving toward real solutions. It's not allowing the honest, open, thoughtful discussion, debate that we need if we're really going to solve these problems.
So my question was, and thank you for that, do you feel like you're hearing that the American people in general are starting to want their government to be more accountable? Are you feeling like there's a growing number of Americans that are saying, I'm willing to deal with facts now, instead of just being sold something.
I hope so. Again, I don't, like President Obama said, boy, you give them all those facts and they're going to throw up their hands and give up hope. First of all, I'll never give up hope on America. Okay, even though I think the challenges are daunting, as much as I don't believe collectively we're admitting we have a problem. I mean, the reason I travel around like this and get hoarse by the end of the day trying to convey the information is we need more people understanding, acknowledging, admitting the problem. The solution starts and ends with an informed population, informed electorate. You know, this republic is only designed for and only can succeed with a informed and educated and moral population. That's right. That was from our founders, and I think that's true. So this is all about getting that information, spreading it around. You know, hopefully, you know, the news media will take the information, not just PolitiFact check when I slip up and make a mistake, but actually PolitiFact check the you know, fully vetted, the fully true, complete information. That's really what the American public need to see in news publications, on TV, and radio. And you know, I'm hoping the American population is ready for the truth. I mean, that'll be the grand experiment in 2016 when I'm running for re-election. I mean, is Wisconsin willing in a presidential year where we've tended more blue than even purple or red, are they willing to re-elect a fiscal conservative that his primary mission has been telling people the truth? We'll find out. I mean, I'm not going to change.
Thank you.
Sir.
You mentioned the reserve currency that we have in the world, and of course the price of oil and many other products are based on that. Given the fact that you are pointing out how weak we are economically and we're not facing it, and how weak we have become in our foreign policy, in my opinion, does not say that we're getting very close to the tipping point where the rest of the world says, we're not going to use the dollar anymore, we're going to use a Swiss franc or whatever, a stronger currency from a stronger country. Do you think we're getting close to that?
Well, it's concerning, and the way you start judging that, and let's face it, you watch how trade between different nations is denominated. When more people are trading with either euros, or if you start moving to a basket of currencies like the BRIC countries, that needs to start getting disconcerting for America. I mean, nobody can predict when this, you know, when our day of reckoning occurs. Yeah, I'm personally surprised that Japan can continue to survive with it, you know, over 200% of GDP debt ratio. But you know, Japan's a different culture. They are a saving culture, so they're borrowing that from their own citizens. We're not a big saving culture. I mean, we save some, so again, the same dynamics, the same facts and figures aren't going to hold for America as it does for Japan. But no, that is the danger. And again, nobody can predict when that day of reckoning will occur. But you know, what we can say with certainty is we are grossly irresponsible in terms of our fiscal management, so let's change that. The sooner we change it, the sooner we can stabilize debt at the percentage of GDP it is, and that's the relevant figure, really. It's not necessarily the dollar size, it is the percentage of debt in relation to the size of your economy. I mean, you personalize it on an individual basis, and if you're in your family budget, if you're in debt over your head, how are you going to grow your own personal economy? It's really tough, because what income's coming in is going to buy the basics, and then it's going to service the debt. And the higher your debt service ratio is, the less you're going to have even on basics. You're surely not going to be able to take your kids down to Disney World. You can't afford it. So you're not able to grow your own personal economy. The same microeconomic dynamic occurs on a macro basis with the nation state. So it's really basic common sense. And we ought to start utilizing some common sense. We ought to be honest.